The transport shuttle descended through New Geneva's atmosphere with controlled precision, but Ambassador Kaelen's hearts pounded like war drums. Through the viewport, the human colony world spread below him in geometric patterns of silver cities and emerald agricultural zones. Somewhere down there, Queen Victoria Hayes waited, and the next 48 hours would determine whether two species went to war or found peace. Kaelen adjusted his ceremonial sash, the deep purple fabric marking him as a diplomatic envoy of the Draal Confederacy. His reflection in the viewport showed a face that had seen 40 cycles of life, with the distinctive ridge patterns of his people running from forehead to jaw. 3 of his delegation members sat behind him, equally silent. They all knew what was at stake. The Threshold Sector dispute had brought humanity and the Draal to the edge of open warfare. 20 star systems rich in graviton crystals and rare elements claimed by both species. Border skirmishes had already cost lives on both sides. If these negotiations failed, fleets would mobilize within days. The shuttle touched down on the palace landing pad with barely a tremor. Kaelen rose, forcing his breathing to steady. The hatch opened and New Geneva's air rushed in, carrying scents of vegetation he couldn't identify. A line of human soldiers stood at attention, their dress uniforms pristine, weapons clearly visible. A message, Kaelen understood. We are ready for either outcome. A human woman approached, her dark skin gleaming in the afternoon sun, her posture radiating controlled authority. She wore a simple but elegant blue suit, and her hair was pulled back in tight braids decorated with small silver ornaments. "Ambassador Kaelen," she said, her voice warm despite the tension. "I am Chief Advisor Patricia Monroe. Queen Hayes welcomes you to New Geneva and looks forward to productive discussions." Kaelen bowed in the Draal fashion, placing both hands over his primary heart. "The honor is ours, Advisor Monroe. We come seeking mutual understanding." The delegation was escorted through corridors of polished stone and living wood, an architectural style that seemed to merge technology with nature. Kaelen noted security cameras at every junction, armed guards at strategic positions. The humans were taking no chances, and neither was he. 2 of his own security officers followed at a discreet distance. They entered a vast reception hall where hundreds of humans and a handful of other species gathered. Crystalline chandeliers cast warm light across the assembled crowd. At the far end of the room, on a raised platform, stood Queen Victoria Hayes. Kaelen had studied her file thoroughly. 42 Earth years old. Widow. Her husband, King Consort Marcus Hayes, killed 3 years ago when a Draal patrol craft fired on a human medical vessel in disputed space. The incident had nearly triggered war then. That she was willing to negotiate now spoke of either extraordinary wisdom or calculated strategy, but the files hadn't prepared him for the reality. Queen Hayes stood with absolute confidence, her copper-brown skin radiant against a white gown that seemed to capture and reflect the light. Her hair fell in natural curls to her shoulders, and her eyes, even from this distance, held an intensity that made Kaelen's breath catch. She wore minimal jewelry, just a simple crown of silver that seemed more symbolic than ornamental. Advisor Monroe led them forward. The crowd parted. Kaelen felt every eye upon him, weighing, judging. Some faces held curiosity, others barely concealed hostility. He couldn't blame them. The Draal had killed their people too. They reached the platform. Queen Hayes descended the 3 steps to meet them at eye level, a gesture Kaelen recognized as deliberate. She was offering equality, not dominance. "Ambassador Kaelen," she said, extending her hand in the human greeting. "Welcome to New Geneva." Her hand was warm, her grip firm without being aggressive. Kaelen held it for the appropriate duration, then released it. This was the moment for formal diplomatic opening, the carefully rehearsed words that would set the tone for everything to follow. Instead, looking into those intelligent, weary eyes, seeing the genuine hope mixed with carefully guarded pain, Kaelen's prepared speech evaporated. What emerged was pure, unfiltered truth. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent hall, "you are the most beautiful ruler I have ever had the honor to address." The silence that followed was absolute. Kaelen's mind caught up with his mouth a heartbeat too late. Horror flooded through him. In Draal culture, acknowledging a leader's aesthetic presence was the highest compliment, a recognition of their complete embodiment of authority and grace. But humans, he suddenly remembered from a footnote in his cultural briefing, considered such comments inappropriate in formal settings, especially when directed at women in power. The Queen's security detail shifted. Hands moved toward weapons. Advisor Monroe's expression froze. Kaelen's own security officers tensed behind him, ready for violence. He had just destroyed galactic peace with a compliment. Queen Hayes stood perfectly still for 3 seconds that felt like years. Then, impossibly, her lips curved into a smile. Not the diplomatic smile of official portraits, but something genuine, almost surprised. She laughed, a sound that rang through the hall like music. "Well," she said, her voice carrying amusement and something else Kaelen couldn't identify, "that's certainly the most honest opening to negotiations I've ever experienced." The tension in the room didn't disappear, but it shifted, becoming something less immediately dangerous. The Queen turned to her advisor, Patricia. "I think the ambassador and I should speak privately before the formal sessions begin. Have refreshments sent to the garden terrace." Monroe looked like she wanted to object, but she simply nodded. "Of course, Your Majesty." Queen Hayes gestured toward a side entrance. "Ambassador, would you walk with me?" Kaelen's throat felt dry, but he managed to speak. "It would be my privilege, Your Majesty." They walked through corridors that grew progressively more intimate, away from the grand public spaces into areas that felt more personal. The Queen's guards followed at a distance, as did one of Kaelen's officers. The Queen pushed open a glass door, and they stepped onto a terrace overlooking gardens that took Kaelen's breath away. Flowers in colors he had no names for grew in carefully tended beds. Trees with silver bark reached toward the sky. A small fountain bubbled in the center, and the air smelled of growing things and water. The Queen moved to a bench beneath one of the silver trees and sat, patting the space beside her. "Sit, please, and Ambassador, you can relax. You're not about to be executed for a cultural misunderstanding." Kaelen sat, maintaining proper distance. "Your Majesty, I must apologize. My comment was inappropriate by your cultural standards. It was meant as a compliment in Draal tradition, but I should have been more careful." "You should have," she agreed, but her tone held no anger. "My advisors will probably write 3 reports about this, but honestly, it's been 3 years since anyone looked at me and saw anything other than the grieving widow, or the military commander, or the political figure. You saw a person. That matters." She turned to face him fully, and Kaelen saw the exhaustion beneath her composed exterior. "Tell me about Draal courtship customs, Ambassador. I'm genuinely curious." For the next hour, they talked. Not about disputed sectors or military buildups or treaty terms, but about culture and tradition and the small human details that made life meaningful. Kaelen learned that the Queen had loved her husband deeply, that they had met in a university library while both researching ancient Earth history. She told him about her daughter Elena, 12 years old and currently at a secure location off-world. "She asked me why we have to talk to the people who killed her father," the Queen said quietly. "I told her that her father died because we weren't talking enough, and I won't let that happen again if there's any way to prevent it." Kaelen felt something shift in his chest. "Your Majesty, I lost my bondmate to human weapons 4 years ago. She was a civilian transport pilot caught in crossfire during the Outer Marker incident. I understand your daughter's question. I asked it myself." The Queen met his eyes. "Then you understand why we're here, why this has to work." "I do," Kaelen said. "But I fear my people's military command may not share our perspective." "Neither do mine," the Queen admitted. "Admiral Rodriguez has been lobbying for a preemptive strike for 6 months. She thinks I'm weak for pursuing negotiation." They sat in silence for a moment, 2 people who had lost too much, trying to prevent others from losing more. "Formal negotiations begin tomorrow," the Queen said. "I'm proposing a shared governance zone for the threshold sector. Equal representation, joint resource management, mutual benefit." "It's a good proposal," Kaelen said. "But Supreme Commander Thane will reject it. He believes showing any compromise is showing weakness." "Then we'll have to change his mind," the Queen said. "Or find a way around him." A server appeared with refreshments, elegant glasses containing something that sparkled in the light. The Queen raised hers. "To honest mistakes and unexpected conversations." Kaelen raised his own glass. to peace, however we achieve it. The negotiation chamber was designed to intimidate. A vast oval table dominated the center, with delegations seated on opposite sides like opposing armies. Holographic displays showed star charts, resource assessments, military deployments. Everything about the room suggested conflict, not cooperation. Supreme Commander Thane had arrived overnight, and his presence filled the Draal side of the table like a thundercloud. He was massive even by Draal standards, his ridge patterns darkened by age and battle scars. He looked at the human delegation with barely concealed contempt. Admiral Julia Rodriguez matched him in intensity, if not size. Her gray hair was cut military short, and her uniform displayed enough medals to armor a small ship. She sat at Queen Hayes' right hand, her expression suggesting she'd rather be commanding a fleet attack than sitting at a negotiating table. Queen Hayes stood, commanding attention without raising her voice. "Thank you all for coming. We gather here because the alternative is war, and war serves neither of our peoples. I propose we establish a joint governance zone in the Threshold sector, with equal representation and shared resource allocation." She activated a holographic display showing her detailed proposal. It was fair, Kaelen had to admit. Perhaps more than fair. It gave the Draal access to resources they desperately needed while maintaining human security concerns. Supreme Commander Thane didn't even wait for the presentation to finish. Unacceptable. The room tensed. Queen Hayes remained calm. "Perhaps you'd like to explain your objections, Commander." "The Threshold sector is Draal space by right of first exploration," Thane said, his voice like grinding stone. "We will not share what is already ours." "Your proposal is an insult. The Threshold sector was first mapped by human probes 70 years ago," Admiral Rodriguez shot back. "We have documentation." "Forged documentation," Thane said dismissively. Kaelen watched the exchange deteriorate, saw the Queen's attempts to redirect toward productive discussion get steamrolled by military posturing on both sides. His own attempts to support the Queen's proposals were met with glares from Thane. After 4 hours, they broke for midday meal. Kaelen found himself in a side corridor away from both delegations when his communication device chimed. The message was coded from his deputy, Commander Vess, Ambassador, urgent, private channel, now. Kaelen found an empty conference room and activated secure communication. Vess's face appeared, his ridge patterns flushed with stress. "Ambassador, I've discovered something. You need to see this." Data files appeared on Kaelen's display. Communication logs, supply requisitions, movement orders. As Kaelen read, ice formed in his veins. "This can't be real," he whispered. "It's real," Vess said. "I verified it 3 times. There's a team here embedded in our security detail. Their orders come directly from Thane's inner circle. They're going to assassinate Queen Hayes during tomorrow's session and make it look like her own security failed. The evidence will suggest human military factions wanting to escalate to war." Kaelen's hands shook. "But why? What does this accomplish?" "War," Vess said simply. "Thane and his faction want war. They believe humans are weak, and that a quick, decisive strike will secure the Threshold sector and cow humanity into submission. They need the Queen dead and the blame unclear enough to justify their fleet mobilization. When? Tomorrow. During the afternoon session, the Queen traditionally gives an address to both delegations. That's when they'll strike." Kaelen's mind raced. He could warn his own delegation, but Thane's people would simply deny everything and accelerate their timeline. He could try to stop the assassins himself, but he was a diplomat, not a soldier. He could flee, save himself, let events unfold. Or he could warn the humans. Everything he'd been taught, every loyalty he'd sworn, said he should protect his people's interests. But what were his people's interests? Starting a war built on murder and lies, killing a woman who genuinely sought peace, condemning thousands, maybe millions, to die for the ambitions of military commanders? He thought of the Queen's words in the garden, about her daughter asking why they had to talk to the people who killed her father, about choosing conversation over conflict. He thought of his own lost bondmate, and all the others who had died because people chose violence over difficult conversations. "Vess," he said quietly, Send me everything you have, all the evidence. Then get yourself to safety. What are you gonna do? Something probably very stupid, Kaelen said. And possibly treasonous. He found Advisor Monroe in the human delegation's secure wing. Getting there required passing through 3 security checkpoints and enduring suspicious stares from armed guards, but he managed. Monroe received him in a small office, her expression wary. Ambassador Kaelen, if you have proposals to discuss, they should go through proper channels. This isn't about proposals, Kaelen said. He activated his datapad and slid it across her desk. This is about an assassination plot against your queen. Monroe's eyes widened as she reviewed the files. Her fingers flew across her own terminal, cross-referencing, verifying. The color drained from her face. How did you obtain this? She demanded. My deputy is loyal to peace, not to commanders who start wars with murder. Question is, what do we do about it? Monroe was already moving, speaking into her communication device in rapid coded language. Within minutes, Kaelen found himself in a much larger room with much more hostile faces. Admiral Rodriguez looked like she wanted to shoot him on principle. This could be a Draal trick, she said flatly. Feed us false intelligence, make us paranoid, disrupt the negotiations. To what end? Kaelen asked. If we wanted to disrupt negotiations, we could simply walk away. We don't need elaborate deceptions. He's right, Monroe said. And the intelligence matches movements we've observed but couldn't explain. Extra security personnel who aren't on official rosters. Equipment requisitions that don't match standard protocols. So what do you suggest? Rodriguez asked Kaelen, her tone still hostile. We arrest members of your delegation based on your word? No, Kaelen said. That would cause an immediate diplomatic incident and likely trigger the very war we're trying to prevent. Instead, we let the assassination attempt proceed, but we prepare for it. Monroe shook her head. Absolutely not. We will not use Queen Hayes as bait. She won't be bait, Kaelen said. She'll be protected. But if we expose the plot before it happens, Thane will simply claim we fabricated evidence to discredit the Draal delegation. If we catch them in the act, with witnesses from both sides, the truth becomes undeniable. They argued for another hour. In the end, it was Queen Hayes herself who made the decision. She arrived at the secure room, having been briefed en route, and listened to Kaelen's proposal with the same intense focus she'd shown in the garden. I'll do it, she said simply. Your Majesty, Monroe protested, but the Queen raised a hand. If Ambassador Kaelen is right, and I believe he is, then we need proof that elements within the Draal Command are working against peace, proof that can't be dismissed or explained away. This is the only way to get it. She turned to Kaelen. You're putting your career on the line for this, possibly your life. Why? Because I'm tired of watching people die for lies, Kaelen said. And because you were right, your daughter's question is the right question. This has to stop. The Queen smiled, sad but genuine. Then let's stop it. The next afternoon, the negotiation chamber filled again. Kaelen sat with his delegation, hyper-aware of every movement around him. He'd identified 3 security officers who matched Vess's intelligence, positioned at strategic points around the room. One stood near the human delegation's entrance. One near the primary exit. One had a clear line of sight to the Queen's position. Thane sat like a monument, his expression revealing nothing. Did he know Kaelen had betrayed the plot? Was this all part of some larger strategy Kaelen couldn't see? Queen Hayes rose to deliver her afternoon address, as was traditional on the second day of negotiations. Kaelen's heart hammered. Human security officers positioned based on his intelligence appeared to be in normal positions, but he knew each one was ready. Colleagues, the Queen began, her voice carrying across the chamber. We stand at a crossroads. The decisions we make in this room will echo across generations. The assassin moved. It happened faster than thought. The Draal security officer raised what looked like a standard-issue pulse weapon, but Kaelen recognized the modification. A disruptor bolt, designed to punch through personal shields and cause catastrophic tissue damage. A killing weapon, Kaelen didn't think. He launched himself from his seat, crossing the space between himself and the Queen in 3 long strides. The weapon fired. The impact hit Kaelen in the chest like a hammer blow from a god. He felt something inside him rupture, felt his secondary heart stutter and stop. He crashed into the Queen, his momentum carrying them both to the ground behind her podium as the room erupted into chaos. Shouts, weapons fire, the heavy sound of bodies hitting the floor. Kaelen's vision blurred, but he saw human security officers taking down all three conspirators simultaneously. He saw Thane rise from his seat, genuine shock on his face. He felt the Queen's hands on his chest pressing against the wound. "Medical team, now," she was shouting. "Someone get a medical team in here." "Did we?" Kaelen managed to gasp, blood bubbling in his throat. "Did we get them all?" "You saved my life," the Queen said, and there were tears on her face. "You took the shot meant for me." "Had to," Kaelen whispered. "Had to prove. Not all Draal want war." Thane was there suddenly, kneeling beside Kaelen, his massive hands gentle as he examined the wound. "Ambassador, you fool. You magnificent fool." "Commander," Kaelen managed. "The truth. Tell them you didn't." "Order this." "I didn't," Thane said, his voice thick with something Kaelen had never heard from the Supreme Commander before. "Emotion. I wanted to negotiate from strength, yes. I believe we should claim the threshold sector fully. But not this. Never this. Medical personnel arrived, humans and Draal working together to stabilize Kaelen. He felt the pain receding, either from medication or from dying. He wasn't sure which. "The conspirators are in custody," Admiral Rodriguez was saying. "All three alive. They're already confessing, naming their co-conspirators in the Draal military hierarchy." "A faction within my own command," Thane said heavily. "Bryant, a force war." "Not just yours," Rodriguez admitted. "We've had similar elements pushing for preemptive strikes." This could have been the excuse they needed. Kaelen felt himself being lifted onto a medical transport. The Queen's face hovered above him. "Stay with me, Ambassador. That's an order." "Your Majesty," he whispered, "I need to tell you something." She leaned close. Kaelen gathered his remaining strength. "You really are the most beautiful ruler I've ever met," she laughed, a sound somewhere between joy and tears. "You're delirious from blood loss, Ambassador." "Maybe," he agreed, "but it's still true." They worked on him for 6 hours in the Palace Medical Center, human and Draal physicians combining their expertise. His secondary heart was beyond saving, but they managed to repair the primary and stabilize his other damaged organs. When Kaelen finally surfaced from sedation, he found himself in a private room with soft lighting and monitors beeping steadily. Queen Hayes sat in a chair beside his bed, still wearing the same dress from the negotiation chamber, now stained with his blood. "You should change," Kaelen said, his voice rough. She looked down at herself as if just noticing. "Probably. But I made a decision while you were in surgery, and I wanted you to be the first to hear it." "What decision?" "I'm proposing a new kind of alliance between our peoples," the Queen said. "Not just a treaty or a trade agreement. A complete union. And to symbolize that union, to bind our peoples together in a way that can't be easily undone, I'm proposing a marriage." Kaelen's remaining heart skipped. "Your Majesty, I'm honored by the thought, but I'm a simple ambassador. Surely there are more appropriate candidates for a political marriage?" "I'm not proposing to marry you to some appropriate candidate," the Queen said, her eyes holding his. "I'm proposing that you marry me." Kaelen stared. I don't." "Why?" "Because you threw yourself in front of a weapon meant for me," she said simply. "Because you risked everything, your career, your loyalty to your own people, your life, for the truth. Because in 2 days of knowing you, I've seen more genuine honor than I've seen in years of political maneuvering. And because I think, maybe, we could actually make this work." "Your people will object," Kaelen said. "I'm Draal. I'm from the species that killed your husband." "Some will object," the Queen agreed. "Just as some of your people will see you as a traitor, but some will also see what I see. A chance to build something new, a foundation for real peace, not just negotiated ceasefires. I'm not I can't be a king, Kaelen protested. I don't know how to be what you need. Neither did Marcus when we married, the queen said softly. He was a historian, not a statesman, but he learned, and more importantly, we learned together, death. She reached out and took his hand. I'm not asking you to have all the answers, Kaelen. I'm asking you to stand beside me while we figure them out. I'm asking you to help me build a peace that will last. Kaelen looked at their joined hands, human and Draal, different and yet the same in so many ways that mattered. He thought about his lost bondmate, about the Queen's lost husband, about all the lost futures that war had stolen. If I say yes, he said slowly, I'll never be able to return to Draal space. I'll be labeled a traitor by some, a collaborator by others. My family will likely disown me. I know, the Queen said. I'm asking you to give up everything you were for something we could become. It's not fair. It's an enormous sacrifice, and I have no right to ask it of you. But you're asking anyway. I'm asking anyway, she confirmed. Kaelen closed his eyes, feeling the pain in his chest, the exhaustion in his bones, the weight of the choice before him. He could say no, could recover and return to his people, perhaps with some honor intact for exposing the conspiracy, could live out his days in familiar spaces, among familiar faces, or he could say yes, could step into an unknown future, married to a human queen, helping to build something that had never existed before, could make his bondmate's death and Marcus Hayes' death, and all the other deaths mean something. He opened his eyes and looked at the woman who had laughed at his diplomatic mistake and then walked with him in a garden and now sat beside his hospital bed wearing his blood on her dress. Yes, he said, I'll marry you. The Queen's smile was radiant, though I have one condition. Name it. Our daughter, Kaelen said. Elena. I want to meet her before the wedding. I want her to approve. I won't come between a mother and child, and I won't make her accept a stepfather she doesn't choose. Tears spilled down the Queen's cheeks. You haven't even met her and you're already thinking like a parent. I'm about to become one, Kaelen said. I should probably start preparing. The wedding happened 3 weeks later, once Kaelen had recovered enough to stand without assistance. The ceremony was broadcast across both human and Draal space, watched by billions. It was a hybrid of traditions, Draal and human customs woven together into something new. Kaelen wore formal Draal robes in deep purple, with the silver chains of bonding draped across his shoulders. Queen Hayes wore white, as human tradition dictated, but the dress was designed by a Draal artist, incorporating patterns that honored both cultures. Elena stood as the Queen's attendant, 12 years old and solemn in a dress that matched her mother's. She had spent 2 weeks getting to know Kaelen, asking him difficult questions, testing his sincerity. The night before the wedding, she had hugged him and whispered, I think Mom chose well. Thane attended, having spent the week since the assassination attempt purging conspirators from Draal military ranks and working with Admiral Rodriguez on joint security protocols. He stood as Kaelen's witness, a gesture that carried enormous symbolic weight. The ceremony itself was simple. Vows exchanged, promises made. 2 hands joined, human and Draal, symbolizing 2 peoples choosing peace. But the true moment came after the ceremony, during the reception, when Kaelen and Victoria stood together on a balcony overlooking New Geneva. Fleets from both species hung in orbit above them, no longer positioned for war but for celebration. We're going to face opposition, Victoria said quietly. There are factions on both sides that want this to fail. I know, Kaelen said, but we have something they don't. What's that? Each other. And the truth, and the willingness to keep trying even when it's hard. Victoria leaned against him, and Kaelen wrapped his arm around her shoulders. They stood like that, watching the sun set over a world that had almost been a battlefield. Do you ever think about it? Victoria asked. About the moment in the negotiation chamber. What made you move? Every day, Kaelen admitted. I see it in my dreams. Weapon rising, the choice between staying safe and acting. What made you choose to act? Kaelen thought about it, really thought about it. I think, he said slowly, it was because I saw you in the garden. Saw you as a person, not just a political figure, and I couldn't let that person die for a lie. Everything after that was just following through. A diplomatic mistake that saved galaxies, Victoria said with a small smile. The best mistake I ever made, Kaelen agreed. Above them, the stars began to appear as night claimed the sky. Human and Draal vessels moved in coordinated patterns, beginning joint patrols of the Threshold sector under the new alliance treaty. In the palace below, delegates from dozens of species celebrated the wedding and discussed trade agreements, cultural exchanges, scientific collaboration. War had been averted. Not by military might or political maneuvering, but by one ambassador who saw a person instead of a position, one queen who chose hope instead of vengeance, and one moment of genuine connection that changed everything. Elena appeared in the balcony doorway. Mom, Kaelen? They're asking for you for the first dance. Victoria and Kaelen exchanged glances. Ready? She asked. Not at all, Kaelen admitted. Draal don't dance. We have ceremonial movements, but nothing like human dancing. Then I'll teach you, Victoria said, taking his hand. Just like you'll teach me Draal customs. Just like we'll figure out everything else. Together. They returned to the celebration hand in hand, stepfather and daughter and mother, three people who had found family in the ruins of loss, building something new from the ashes of old grief. The music began. Victoria showed Kaelen the steps. He was clumsy at first, his movements too rigid, too controlled. But she was patient, and Elena laughed, but not unkindly, and slowly Kaelen began to understand the rhythm. They danced under lights that shone like stars, surrounded by people from two species learning to see each other not as enemies but as partners in building a future. It wasn't perfect. There would be setbacks and struggles and moments of doubt, but it was a beginning. And sometimes, a beginning is enough.